All right, let's get into it. Who here speaks English and who only Spanish? Everybody English? English? Okay, good. I'm just going to give a little message to people that speak Spanish, just for the record. A la gente que habla español, yo tengo un canal de YouTube y una página web donde tengo un podcast en español y hablo también de estos temas, digamos que estrategia de inversión, cómo analizar el mercado, cómo utilizar las tecnologías. Entonces, juangalt.com, ahí pueden encontrar la versión en español para que se guíen un poquito también hablando de estos temas. En temas de inversión, lo que se llama el DCA, Dollar Cost Average, comprar semanalmente Bitcoin específicamente, está ya demostrado en data que es una muy buena estrategia, no tanto con otras criptos, pero con Bitcoin sí. All right, so we're going to talk about the Cypherpunk Future. Good. And the idea here is to sort of explore a variety of the paradoxes and sort of ideas in this space and figure out maybe what success looks like. I think to me that's the key question. What does success look like? And I think to the degree to which we don't answer that question, we're not really going to succeed. So just for the record, I mean, I'm a podcaster. I've been making content for 10 years in Bitcoin and crypto. I've worked for Bitcoin Magazine, Cointelegraph, BitcoinNews.com. I got a lot of content out there. I'm part of an HBO documentary with some wild anarchists. If you're interested in some fun, go check that out. It's called The Anarchists. And yeah, there's a few of them here, by the way, in that HBO documentary. So some of you that know me might be wondering, like, hold on, Juan Galt, aren't you a Bitcoin maximalist? What are you doing at a Monero conference, right? And I think that the answer to that is I think we need our values to be a little bit bigger than any single implementation. I think we need to be, we don't want to end up being like crypto partisans, right? I think that would be a mistake. We want to identify our values and push technologies that take us there, right? And so I would say I'm a paranoid crypto anarchist. Who here is a paranoid crypto anarchist? All right, we have like 5. I'll take it. You know, that's pretty good. Too paranoid to raise your hand. That's probably good OPSEC. Great OPSEC right there. And so, okay, so we're paranoid crypto anarchists. Some of us are willing to admit it, not paranoid enough. But what is a paranoid crypto anarchist? I'm going to submit some ideas. I mean, there might be, this isn't like an exhaustive list, but obviously some of the big memes in let's say, the cypherpunk ethos is don't trust, verify. Don't trust, verify means like, you know, just double check, right? And I think cryptographically speaking, that means verifying the cryptography involved. So, right, anybody that fell for the Bitcoin BSV sort of correct right thing, sorry, you're not verifying. Not very cypherpunk of you, but maybe you can pick up a lesson there. Because, you know, one way we can tell if Satoshi is if he actually signs a message with the early Bitcoin private keys, right? So that's key. Being able to verify and not trust it. How's the audio, by the way? Feeling a little echoey. It's good? It's good? Okay, good. I think cypherpunks should take self-custody. I think self-custody is a very clear and obvious value of the cypherpunk. If you have all your Bitcoin in an ETF or in Coinbase, all your crypto, then you're not really a cypherpunk. You're kind of trusting, and you're not really, you know, you don't have your own keys. You're outsourcing it to somebody else. So I think self-custody is a key piece. I think cypherpunks build in public. They build open source code. I don't really care to debate whether source available or FOSS is that big of a deal. As long as you can read the code and audit it, that's good enough for me. But I get that that's a debate there. But building public is huge because we get strength and security in this world of sort of cypherpunk, this cypherpunk vision. We get security from people being able to audit the code and look at it and give feedback and provide constructive feedback and negative feedback. And when you have closed source software, you're trusting and you can't verify. So not very cypherpunk. We also encrypt everything, right? Just encrypt all the messages, encrypt everything, all the encryption, make sure it's extra encrypted. That's generally a good policy, especially messaging and stuff like that, like your cloud storage, right? Generally, that's sort of part of the ethos of the crypto anarchist cypherpunk. And yeah, that's probably a good thing. And authenticate with cryptography. And I think I'm going to sort of talk in this theme a little bit more. I think we have there's a Leviathan rising. There's this sort of monster rising that's a combination of AI and centralized platforms. And we're going to see identity collapse. And cryptography is the only thing that can save it. The only thing that can really probably protect us from deep fakes and from AI abuse is going to be, I think, cryptography. So some memes I think that we're facing right now, right? We saw with Elon Musk's acquisition of X, memes like, identify all the humans, right? So if you want a check mark, everybody can get a check mark. You pay $8, but you gotta send them a phone number that's easily KYC'd. He wants to ban all the bots. Banning all the bots means somehow filtering, and that's not easy, and that's really the rising challenge. AI can pass the Turing test now. It can pass as a human. It's very easy to confuse people with AI, and that's going to increasingly become actually a problem. And the last question that keeps going around is, who is Satoshi Nakamoto, right? Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And I think the reason this question is so fascinating is because it's kind of like this annoying moment in history of actually somebody that appears to have done something very powerful and remained anonymous. And there's a lot of theories about who Satoshi is, but they're all debatable. I can tell you like 5 different theories about who Satoshi Nakamoto is, and I could probably convince you with 3 of them. And they're all contradictory, right? So I think Satoshi's anonymity is it's kind of like light in the darkness, and it ties very deeply with this question of privacy, anonymity, and identity. So the Leviathan is rising. We're all, I think, very aware and conscious of that here in Monerotopia. And it's a surveillance state. It's a centralization of data, right? And the problem that we have is that anonymity is, while very powerful and attractive, is really not sustainable long-term if you're trying to build, right? It's very hard to maintain your anonymity long-term. In fact, Satoshi lasted about 2 years, and as soon as, in his opinion, with the help of Amir Taki and a few other people actually who's here, they got WikiLeaks accepting Bitcoin. He said, wow, you guys have rattled the beehive or the wasp's nest, something like that. And he bounced. Like within a week, he was gone, and he probably destroyed his cryptographic keys so that nobody can ever prove that they are Satoshi or not. And we never heard from him again. So Satoshi's approach was very interesting to anonymity. His anonymity was time limited, surprisingly long in my opinion, but like he lasted about 2 years. He was context limited. He, as far as I know, didn't share opinions about much of anything. He was just very Bitcoin focused, and he was project oriented. He had a goal. He wanted to build Bitcoin, deploy it, and when he saw that his risk was going up, he bounced. So anonymity is not sustainable for very long. So just some thoughts on strategy. I think this is sort of somewhat obvious, but I think it's good to put it in paper, right? So you want to have a KYC sort of normie self, right? You want to have something that's, has a tax accountant and stuff, right? Something that's real boring and not a threat to anybody. And then your online stuff, probably make it pseudonymous. You probably want to go spread some memes on the internet. But that's not going to be very high security. That's going to be like mid security, because eventually the odds of it tying back to you are reasonably high, and you end up building brands online and stuff, and that sticks, right? And anonymity I think is sort of like a tactical thing. It's a sniper rifle, right? Like you have an idea, you can have an impact. Maybe you have to you reveal some corruption, or you have a project that needs to be deployed. You get put on the mask, deploy, destroy the identity. I think that's sort of the right approach and the right way to use anonymity, and obviously use cryptography and Tor and all the big toys. What about money though? So we have this issue is that blockchains don't scale, and I know that we've been talking about a little bit about how to scale Monero and stuff. And I think there's some really interesting scaling technology there, but I think the general consensus is that blockchains don't scale, and we've had this conversation in this industry for a long time. Bitcoin was designed, a lot of these blockchains are designed fundamentally to deal with this on spent transaction outputs and like dealing with the double spending problem. Double spending problem is like making sure you can't send the same Bitcoin to 2 different people. That's really their whole approach, is to solve that problem, and it's a very tricky problem. And it has, there's this idea like there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs. We made a lot of trade-offs to be able to get digital scarcity. And we've known the limitations and the trade-offs from the beginning. Hal Finney, one of the first hires at the PGP Corporation, one of the key players in the development of PGP, worked on it his whole career. An inventor of RPow, a proof of work sort of centralized digital cash system in like the 90s, right, was one of the first to really poke some holes into blockchain scalability. He said, Bitcoin itself cannot scale to have every single financial transaction in the world be broadcast to everyone and included in the blockchain. There needs to be a secondary layer payment system which is lighter weight and more efficient. He said this in 2010, and I don't think we've wrestled with it. properly. So I'm just going to run through some quick math. This isn't perfect, but it's it gives us an idea of how difficult it is to scale a blockchain system to global adoption. So currently Bitcoin can handle more or less 27 transactions per second. The global demand goes between 1,700 transactions per second to 24,000 per second. So Bitcoin on-chain normal can't scale. If you use the Lightning Network, Lightning scales in theory to up to 16,000 transactions per second. It requires 2 on-chain transactions to go in and out securely and scale self-custody specifically, scale that UTXO. And that's tough because even though that's a big scale up, it's still pretty bad. So to onboard 8 billion people, it would require 18 years of transactions, filling 4 megabyte blocks to onboard 8 billion people. So 18 years is a long time. And you might ask, well, bro, why don't you just increase the block size, bro? that's him right there. And the thing is, like, blockchains just don't scale, right? So onboarding 8 billion people in 1 year at 2 transactions each will require about 80 megabyte blocks, or with an average transaction of 250 bytes. That would grow the blockchain about 4 terabytes a year, and full sync would take about 40 days on the average computer. The average computer is about $850, so people would need $3,000 computers or so to be able to sync within the current average, which is about 2 days. So it just becomes very difficult to sync, and thus it becomes very difficult to verify, and thus it stops being paranoid crypto anarchy, starts to centralize. And we end up with node counts like Ethereum or Solana, which is not ideal, I think. And maybe that there's some exaggerations there, but I think the point is sort of pretty sharp, right? Like, blockchains just don't scale very well. So apparently we're stuck in what some people are calling Vitalik's scalability trilemma. I don't know if he actually invented it, but it's pretty sharp. You can only have basically 2 of these. You can have scalability, you can have security, and you can have decentralization. You can only have 2 of these 3. That's what we're dealing with. So Hal proposed a solution to this, and the solution was actually worse than the diagnosis, in my opinion. It was really troubling for my paranoid crypto anarchy bones. He said Bitcoin-backed banks will solve these problems. He said they can work like banks did before the nationalization of currency. Different banks can have different policies, some more aggressive than others, some more conservative. Some would be fractional reserve, others would be 100% Bitcoin-backed. Interest rates may vary between them, and cash from some banks may trade at a discount from that of others. This is the way that private banking worked before the central bank sort of system emerged and kind of took over the gold reserves and did that whole play right before the First World War and such, if I remember correctly. So I believe this would be the ultimate fate of Bitcoin. He doomed us to this issue, this question, to be the high-powered money that serves as a currency for banks that issue their own digital cash. That's rough. That's rough because I love self-custody. I think self-custody is the thing that we actually need to scale. I think scaling works when you centralize everything, it scales, it's fine, but then you don't have self-custody, and so you don't have that crypto anarchy. So I think we need to scale self-custody, but it's quite tricky. So what did he mean by digital cash, though? So in the 90s, actually, like 1982, David Chaum invented something called eCash, Chaumian eCash. And it's a sort of, it's a digital cash that has very attractive properties, I think, as a fellow sort of paranoid crypto anarchist. It's very scalable, and it's potentially incredibly private. It doesn't need any information from you, really. It's just like this little token file you download and you can share it around, and it settles. It just has one big problem. It's very, very custodial. But anyway, this is actually an interface for eCash from the 90s. This thing almost made it into Windows. David Chaum had a deal with Bill Gates that was almost went through. Bill Gates offered him $30 million to install this into every Windows copy, and he offered $30 million to David Chaum. David Chaum declined and asked instead for $1 per every Windows copy, and the deal fell through. But we almost had eCash, dollar-denominated eCash, but eCash, which is, again, very private, very scalable, in every Windows copy. Instead, we got credit card payments, which are pretty bad for privacy. So just a quick question. Who here has an idea of how electronic or eCash works? Nobody? Okay, great. So basically, there's a bank They take your money, right? You send them Bitcoin or whatever. So it's very custodial, entirely custodial. They issue a cryptographic certificate saying, well, here's what I owe you. It's an IOU. And then when you send it to somebody else, you pay them, they grab the certificate, send it to the bank, and the bank credits their account, right? And they can withdraw the Bitcoin or whatever, right? And this is the original way to do it. In the Bitcoin world, we've been developing eCash systems now for like a few years, and there's a couple of big implementations. The idea is Bob is charging Alice for some money for some payment. So Bob sends Alice a Lightning invoice. Alice grabs the Lightning invoice and her eCash tokens and sends them to the mint. The mint destroys the token and pays the Lightning payment. And the Lightning payment makes it back all the way to Bob. Bob gets paid with Lightning. He doesn't have to have a bank account with the mint. It uses the Lightning network as a settlement layer, as an instant settlement layer for medium to small payments. And so there's no credit relationship. It's all very quick. There's some trust in the mint. There's definitely trust in the mint, but it's all fairly, it can be fairly automated. Of course, there'll be very different implementations here and there. So again, eCash is very scalable. It can scale to the whole world because it's like downloading a JPEG, an image file, even less. It has no blockchains, so it's great for payments, very fast as sending a file. Highly private, doesn't require any ID, right? You can just use a VPN, run it through Tor, it'll work, and it's just custodial as fuck. Very, very custodial. So, I mean, we're trying to deal with that problem of custody. So one of the implementations that's trying to like make it a little less custodial is called Fediment. So the idea is like you get together some trusted elders within your local community, and everybody they build a big multi-sig, and then they have like, guns drawn, and nobody tries to steal from anybody. It's kind of the idea. And I think it's sort of interesting, but as a Latin American, I'm pretty uncomfortable with holding other people's money, like I don't want anybody to think that I'm the rich guy of the village. It's just bad OPSEC, right? So my paranoid crypto anarchy doesn't quite like it, but I think it's interesting. And I think there's ways we can potentially use different scripting technologies to constrain that custody and that trust placed in that group, and then potentially emit eCash stuff. I think there's a lot of potential there, but it's still very early. So yeah, as I said before, like I'm trying not to be a partisan in crypto. I'm a self-custody maximalist. I think we do need to sort of push that forward, but there's some really, really deep challenges at hand. So Hal Finney's analysis, I think, raised some really troubling questions, right? And as an anarchist, as an ANCAP for a long time, or somebody that's been a libertarian for a long time, there's this sort of like antagonism towards banks. And I definitely don't like banks. They're very annoying. They ask, it's like everything is KYC. Their apps are terrible. But, why do we hate banks? Like as capitalists, banks are, they're companies, right? They're kind of a big piece of the market of finance. How do you can't have capitalism without capital, and banks are a big piece of that tradition. It's like a 600-year-old tradition of capital management and capital allocation, et cetera, et cetera. So banks are a very interesting kind of organizational structure. It's just that there's some problems, right? I think Hal's sort of analysis also raises the question, if as libertarians we hate fractional reserve, but if a fractional reserve banking system can emerge in the free market and be stable, is it not statist to demonize it? Are we socialists? Are we like anti-fractional reserve socialists, right? Somebody called Rothbard a gold socialist once, and I thought that was really interesting. But because you wanted to like make it illegal to do fractional reserve, isn't that kind of statist, right? And so yeah, if the free market is not capable of is the free market not capable of correcting the excesses of private banking, right? I think that's a question that we have to deal with. But of course, we don't necessarily live in a free market. But these are the questions that I think we have to still wrestle with. And could it be? I think the question more pointed is, could it be that the problem are not private banks, but central banks, right? And I think Satoshi talked about that. Satoshi pointed out that the current sort of way that money settles is through this sort of central bank hierarchy. And with something like Bitcoin, we don't need a central bank hierarchy because we have our own settlement rails, right? So maybe there's an opening to do banking without central banks. Central banks actually are in a very funny position. They're trying to launch these CBDCs, which stand for central bank digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies are literally trying to go straight to consumer. They're trying to make it so that there's no bank in the middle, so that you have an account directly with the Fed. They might like that idea. It might be convenient, but they're basically trying to push out private banks. They're trying to get private banks out of the middle. They're trying to just go bypass the banks, right? And the banks are not going to like that. So banks don't actually like central bank digital currencies. And I think we need to recognize that there's a potential alliance there that's rising. JP Morgan, the guy from JP Morgan, the CEO, what's his name? Diamond. Jamie Dimon was on MSNBC talking shit about CBDCs the other day. He's like, no, not happening, right? Because they don't want to give up the business, right? It's not convenient to the banks that central banks have a direct relationship with the consumers, right? And so that's going to be an interesting power struggle, I think. So I think the structure looks a little bit like this. There's you, and there's the banks behind you, and then central banks are pointing the gun at them. But then there's the deep state, right? The deep state controls foreign policy, and the reason that they want to build this Leviathan is because they want control over the money to be able to punish their enemies. They want to be able to do sanctions. They want to be able to do censorship. They want to be able to do deplatforming. And they want to control the minds, and they want to control the memes. And that's really, it's about power. But there's a deep power structure in there. And so I think it's important to understand the order of that power structure, And banks, at the end of the day, are like the most consumer-facing sort of side of it. But I still kind of hate banks, not gonna lie. So banks are the guts of the Leviathan. They're the ones that we actually have relationships with directly. They're kind of like zombies. They're like modern zombies. They're sort of propped alive by the inertia of their success. And they authenticate users with face recognition, with names and addresses, and they grab your ID and they check it against a database. The thing is, those databases, they used to be secure back in the day because they were based in paper. You would show up to your bank, and they would look at you and see your ID and go look for your file and take out a piece of paper and be like, yeah, that's you. Okay, I'll access your money. It was very secure in the paper age, right? Because who's going to go into a bank and steal a metric ton of paper, right? If you're going to take paper, you're going to take the cash, not the KYC documents, right? But times have changed. That's not really how it works anymore. Now there's massive centralization of data that gets hacked all the time, and it's actually causing big problems for the Leviathan. The Leviathan is it's kind of weak. So there's actually some good news for people that care about privacy and sovereignty here. The Leviathan is a little tambly. It's a little unstable, and I'm gonna tell you why. There's a very long list of hacks that have happened recently, and I could have had like 20 slides, but Equifax exposed 147 million records, including social security numbers, addresses, to the web in 2017. Marriott, 300 million guest records, such as passport numbers and payment details, were stolen. Anthem, 79 million medical records, including social security numbers. OPM hack, this was great. This was bad, but amazing. 21 million federal employee records, including social security numbers, addresses, names, fingerprints, etc. 40 million payment credit cards from Target, 70 million customer details stolen. Yahoo, 3 billion accounts were breached, exposing emails, phone numbers, and hash passwords. Expedia, 24 million South African and 800,000 businesses had personal business data leaked. Facebook, 530 million user records, phone numbers, names exposed. Capital One, 100 million US and 6 million Canadian credit card records were leaked. National Public Data 2024, 2.9 billion records, including social security numbers and address, have been leaked, impacting nearly all Americans. I thought it was 40 minutes. Yeah, I'll try to get through it. So, long story short, everybody's being hacked. All your data is out in the internet, and identity theft is rising as a result. So, in 2014, identity theft data showed that there was $10 billion more in identity theft in the United States than all other forms of theft combined. So in 2014, $24 billion of theft damages were calculated, out of which 14 billion were identity theft. The identity system of the Leviathan is crumbling. And this has gotten worse, right? In 2021, identity fraud impact combining both like all forms of identity theft fraud rose to $52 billion, affecting 42 million US customers. So in the digital age, data theft is not the exception to the rule, it's the norm. It is the rule. It is what happens. And that's a very like non-ideological reason to not use KYC services. Like your data is not secure, they can't secure it. We have enough history to prove that they can't secure your data. So the Leviathan is weak. That's good. That's good news for us paranoid crypto anarchists. KYC is imploding. I don't see anybody talking about this, so I make sure to like make that point. And I think we have a shot at victory. I think we have an opportunity to see a world that's a little bit more beautiful, more, let's say, harmonic between the digital and the organic. I think we have to ask what victory looks like. So I'm going to now tell you guys kind of what we're doing with this very poor quality image that I stitched together in about 10 minutes. But this is the metaphor I've been playing with at this conference, right? So all the gold, 90% of the money is in a walled garden behind multiple layers of brick. And there's dragons that try to protect it, right? And basically, Bitcoin just blew a hole through one of the walls, and we have some bridges, and we're like, we're getting close to the gold. Like some of that money's coming out, and the reason Monero doesn't pump is because it's too far away. It's really hard to get the gold from the walled garden all the way here. But as long as these bridges stay up, and as long as there's a hole on that wall, we have a chance. So I think our job as like let's say the purists, the true believers, is to make sure there's bridges and holes in that wall. And then we'll get to sort of access, liberate that gold and have access to it and be able to have the, part of that society-wide crypto anarchist or cypherpunk vision. So yeah, closing call, I think we need to collaborate more. I think we should probably pay close attention to eCash and see where it makes sense to use it, where it doesn't. Again, I think there might be ways to restrain the risks of third-party custody with scripts in various ways, and maybe do some eCash on top of that. I think Bitcoin and Monero have a lot of potential to collaborate, and there's going to be a panel coming up on how to make sure you can easily swap Monero. Like, what are the ways to make sure there's always decentralized ways to trade Bitcoin for Monero? And there's going to be potentially a self-custody push soft fork in Bitcoin in the not too distant future. I am generally for it. I think there's some things we can do to scale self-custody further. And so I hope that when that happens, you guys sort of partake in that civil I don't know, disobedience, or that crypto protest. I guess we'll see how it plays out, but it's going to be interesting. So I'll leave you with this question: what does success look like? Please consider that. Make content, make art. Let's visualize that. And I think we're all on the same team. I think Monero people and crypto people and Bitcoin people are all really on the same team. What I was going to say is I think the Bitcoin people are envious of Monero's privacy. I'll be the first to say it if they haven't said it. I think Monero people are envious of the Bitcoin price rise. I think that's probably true, It's just dropping some bombs, but I think we can work together and maybe get the best of both worlds if we achieve it. So that's it. Thank you so much. Can we do some questions? Do we have time for couple questions?
Great job as always. I just want to quickly say, for those that are at home, we just got xmrchat.com/Monerotalk working for this stream. So if you're at home and you're watching this and you have any questions, please send a Monero-based super chat by going to the link xmrchat.com/Monerotalk, and we'll see them pop up on the screen, and we'll bring those questions up over here.
Go ahead.
Question, could you just clarify, eCash is the rebrand of BCHA, is that correct?
BCHA?
The Bitcoin Cash which forked
no,
to
no.
BSV,
No,
and
no, no.
then forked again to BCHA, and then BCHA rebranded to XEC. Are we talking about the same coin?
No, most certainly not talking about that. eCash is not a coin. eCash is a technology.
Okay.
eCash can be implemented with any coin. So you put a collateral in a little mint, a bank, and then the bank issues digital cash, cryptographic cash. It's a 20, 30-year-old technology. Look up Chaumian eCash. Very powerful stuff. It's just that it's very custodial.
Okay, thanks.
It's not a coin. It would be a great coin. I'm sure it'll pump and dump really nice. Really good.
Oh, thank you for your talk.
best coin.
Thank you for your talk. I'm going to preface my question by saying something about myself, sort of doxing myself.
Can you speak a little louder? I can't.
Okay. I'm going to preface my question by saying something about myself. I'm 67 years old. When I was 2 years old, in 1959, Bank Americard, which is the precursor to Visa, was launched. My question is, do you believe that current modern blockchains today scale better or worse than Bank Americard did in 1959 with the technology of 1959?
So I don't know, but I think what we're trying to scale is self-custody. I think that's actually the big difference, because we can already scale centralized technology. That's not an issue. Facebook works, Twitter works, banks more or less work, but there's no self-custody there. So maybe you can enlighten us on that.
I'm comparing Visa transaction rates or Bank Americard transaction rates in 1959 when it was raised with the technology at the time. Punch cards, telegraph lines, and tabulating machines, which was the primary technology. Digital computers are getting off the ground with the capability of doing transactions on the Visa network or the Bank Americard network. And I'm comparing that with the capability of modern blockchain today. That's what I'm saying. Which one do you think has higher throughput in transactions per second?
They're probably comparable. I don't know. I will have to look into it. I don't know.
Thank you.
Well, can you tell us which one scales more? Because that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
It is a trick question. I honestly believe the Monero network scales way better today than Bank Americard did in 1959.
I'll give you this. The Monero scaling design, very, very interesting. Very, very intriguing. So, good stuff. Very good stuff.
The reason I'm saying this is because of technological change. That's what I'm saying. That's what I believe. I believe Monero today scales way better than Bank Americard did back in 1959.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the goal is 8 billion people, right? Maybe 10 in a decade, so thank you.
Thank you.
Can you comment on, I'm hearing throughout the conference and other crypto conferences, and the conversation always centers around onboarding 8 billion people of the entire planet. I think that's unrealistic and shouldn't be the standard that we're seeking to work off of, especially with the Monero community being cypherpunk anarchists. We don't want to have a mainstream technology that's adopted by every single person per se. I know there was hope for that with Bitcoin early on, but the scaling issues happened. So what are your thoughts on that? Are you not content to just have our own little cypherpunk utopia? We trade amongst ourselves. At this point, Monero is sufficient. I don't know how many agorists and freedom people are out there.
So maybe that's your vision of success. I think it's not mine. I think there's strength in numbers. I think anonymity benefits from large pools of people. I think if we're small pockets of ANCAPs, we're going to be easily targeted. If everybody is a crypto anarchist by default because we are the technology, we are the finance rails, then it's a lot harder to take it down. So I think there's strength in numbers, and I think the 8 billion people is important because that's the ultimate goal. But yeah, we can grow in waves and scale in steps, right? So again, on-chain Bitcoin at first was after the block size limit was put in by Satoshi. I think it was 1 megabyte. We had SegWit, which grew it to about 4 megabytes, and then we got Lightning, which is maybe a 50x scaling improvement. So we're growing it in waves, and I think that's fine. It's just eye on the price, right?
Hey, nice talk.
Thank
And
you.
big kudos for bringing your laser eyes to a Monero conference. Nice one. And
It's fun.
on that note, so I feel like this might be a bit of a repetitive question. It's to do with scaling. I'm sitting next to my buddy, who's now behind me. I might be stealing his thunder here as well, but we were both looking at each other, and I think I can probably speak for him, where I think we both believe in Moore's law. So when
Right.
you had your slides regarding the 4 meg blocks and the years it would take, it just all felt a little bit dated.
Sure.
So I don't think it's so much a question here as I want to invite you to leave your small blocks in 2017, ditch your laser eyes before 100K, and come fully over to the dark
Never
side.
ditching the laser eyes. Go to 0, I'll still have the laser eyes. My grave will have laser eyes painted on it.
No, you might get 100K soon, and then you can ditch them, right?
Yeah, I mean, Moore's law might be a thing. I don't know. Like, I think there's been some skepticism about it. Apparently, it's slowed down a little bit. Maybe it'll pick back up. But like, what's the time frame? I mean, how many years will we be able to run a 80 megabyte blockchain, block per block, blockchain on a laptop, right? Is that at 50 years, right? Huh? Right. Yeah, how we get there is in a way less important than where we're going. We'll find different paths, right? But maybe if it turns out Moore's law lets us run 80 megabyte blockchains on a laptop in 10 to 20 years, let's go. Great.
Yeah, to the scaling thing. First off, great talk, and I mostly agree with you. And also like to combine all of the sentiments a little bit. I think for the moment it's yes, we shouldn't worry about scaling to 8 billion people at this second, because it's needs to be a certain mindset, and people learn through pain at certain times, and for the moment Monero works for the communities that needs it, and there's for example a German dude that is unbanked, and now he recommends to his community to use Monero. So it's basically for these people.
Right.
But I agree with you. We should, in the long term, look at the whole world and building something that is usable for everybody, not the tech savvy, and just everybody.
Right.
And I also agree with Arctic Mine and the gentleman before me that the thing with the very restricted block sizes and the blockchains not scaling is yes, at that moment it doesn't really scale, and in the moment we can't scale to 8 billion people, but we can scale better than Bitcoin at the moment, and Monero does it. And I think there's as Luke Parker and so on, there's improvements in cryptography and in tech, in Moore's law, and with if you watch the terabyte price for HDDs, and SSDs, they went down over time, and it's it keeps on chugging along, and Moore's law was pretty much dead.
Right. Yeah, the problem is not data storage as much as it's sync time. So when you download Bitcoin Core and you try to sync, if you want to actually verify the history and verify the supply, it's going to take 2 days. And most people just and they never come back. So that's a UX issue, right? Now, there's I know that Monero has different checkpoints and different ways to navigate that stuff. I think that's interesting. I would love to see a apples to apples comparison on that front. But I think if a lot of the Bitcoin sort of, let's say, graybeards came together today and said, okay, if we wanted to design this from scratch, what would we do that would be different than Satoshi's design, right? And you'll probably have very different answers and many of these details, right? But from there to actually changing Bitcoin is very difficult because we don't want to break it, right? So to some degree, the Bitcoiners are just working with what we got and pushing where we can. But so I think there's both two different strategies potentially, right?
Okay, then I actually have a question at that point. Are you aware of that Satoshi thought about certain features for Bitcoin, but he wasn't able or didn't know of a way to implement them for this?
Which features?
Stealth addresses, or yes, I mean, I can like show you that.
No, I know,
like, it's
I know
written
that
in Bitcoin.
Satoshi
Okay.
was surprised by ring signatures, I believe, and I know that stealth addresses were like an early idea that has now been implemented, right? Again, Cake Wallet has stealth addresses, right?
Yes.
So, sure.
Yeah. But another, thank you for the talk.
Cheers. No,
Anyway.
we can talk more if you want. Yeah. Body anarchist.
What's up, Mr. Juan Galt? I guess I don't have a question. You know me, I like to rant. I just wanted to point something out about, I mean, I like the Vitalik's trilemma.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out that decentralization is not the end goal. Decentralization is a means to an end. The end is permissionless, right? Permissionless security. So decentralization comes at a cost, and the problem is that if you over-design to decentralization, then you end up with a network that might be limited, where it might be able to be expanded a bit more. And the reality is that, would it be better to have custodial solutions for poor people in Africa, let's say, or would it be better if they share nodes where they still hold their own keys, they have their own custody, and there's a little bit of that we sacrifice in decentralization, but you still have, let's say, 50,000 nodes running the Bitcoin protocol, right? You can basically trust that that the current block is the current block, or at least, you know, from launch until say 2020. Like, do you really need to verify that again for the millionth time? So generally, I'll close out here and just say that I feel like we over-designed to decentralization in Bitcoin, whereas if you just change that equation a little bit, you could gain a lot more scalability really quickly. You could get a lot more people on Lightning, and people could get in and out of Lightning easily. I might even use Lightning myself if you guys just increase the blocks a little bit. Not a lot, I'm not a big blocker, just a like moderate increase.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks, man.
No, that's a conversation. That's a good question. That's a conversation that's sort of coming back, because I think that during the Bcash wars there was sort of like a, you know, this block size thing became like a bone that we couldn't just let go of on both sides. But I think looking back and like analyzing it in a more cool-headed way and without the politics, again, Jameson Lopp just gave a speech about why maybe we should increase the block size and how and when and so on. So, and Jameson Lopp is a, you know, fairly prominent Bitcoiner, you know, not like a super laser eye max, even though he's pretty close to that. So, I think the question is, you know, it's probably never going to be closed, right? Because there's no very obvious answer, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you're suggesting we should be a little bit less paranoid in our crypto anarchy, maybe that makes sense. Different contexts, different trade-offs, different threat models, right? Maybe, like, as long as, you know, again, like, we want to extend the sort of cipher civil rights, cipher security to the world, and give the world this gift, whatever implementation that comes in that actually works, you know. So, go ahead.
I loved your talk, and
Thanks, man.
kudos to you for coming here and building a bridge between these two tribes, as you said, and
See how it works.
we're trying not to devolve into tribalism. But I wanted to ask you, how do you address what is, in my eyes, the discrepancy between being a paranoid crypto anarchist and using a completely open ledger that allows anyone to surveil you?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So, I mean, you know this, right? Bitcoin's blockchain is not inherently KYC'd. It's pseudonymous, right? So if you use it correctly, you don't have to leak your personal data. I understand that that's not easy, right? So to me, it's a UX issue. It's not a fundamental issue. It's a skill issue, not a fundamental issue. I think that obviously Monero's privacy is better. I don't think there's much doubt about that at this point, definitely on chain. So, you know, and I think that the cypherpunks had a vision bigger than just privacy and anonymity. I think they liked authentication and cryptographic verification and encryption, right? So if you take a step back from the question of anonymity and you look at what's happened in the past decade, crypto has been, as a whole, has been the widest distribution of private public key cryptography in the history of humanity. And all those cryptographic key pairs can function to enable pretty much all the apps that we're talking about. And so that's cypherpunk, right? Like, people have crypto keys. And as far as like privacy goes, yeah, like I've never told people to use Coinbase, never suggesting people go on ETFs unless they're entirely illiterate technically, in which case it's like, okay, maybe you're not gonna come on this train, you know? To the people that wanna sort of protect themselves from all these hacks, right? Which I think is a very good reason to like be concerned about this. Like, without, like, one thing is the anarchy and the ideology, another thing is like, actually it's really insecure to give these companies your data. Yeah, there's different ways, and it's not easy, but there's definitely plenty of ways, and we have to build those systems
Also,
better.
when you talk about onboarding 8 billion people, and you imagine a world where crypto is sort of the day-to-day, regular currency that everyone uses, we should bring it back to a physical level where people are transacting and you're buying, your beer with Bitcoin or Monero, and you're interacting in the real world. So you're not hiding behind a computer, and you can say, oh, my address is not KYC'd, you don't know who I am. You're dealing with these digits. In the digital world, you're actually a physical being. So I'm more concerned with the wrench attack scenario, for example. You pay someone for a service or an item, and now they know your whole balance or your whole history. And in a way, I see that, of course, Coinbase and all these centralized exchanges, I'm not a fan, but you actually have more privacy by sending some Bitcoin from your Coinbase account than from your self-custody account.
That's a good question. So here's the answer to that question. So there's two real privacy threats. There's the government, and then there's normal criminals, right? The government can see into your Coinbase balance, and they can $5 wrench attack you themselves, right? And they'll have really shiny wrenches, right?
They can 90% tax attack you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's one threat to model, right? The other one is like normies, right? Like normal criminals, right? So for normal criminals in Bitcoin, you use Lightning. Lightning doesn't expose your balance in the same way that Bitcoin does, like on-chain Bitcoin. Also, again, deep storage should be multi-sig, and multi-sig should be distributed, and so that protects you from the $5 wrench attacks. You shouldn't be able to move all your money quickly, right? And in Bitcoin, we have multi-sig. I don't know if Monero has multi-sig. I don't think so.
Yes, it does.
It does?
Yes.
Excellent. So you can do it too, right? So that solves that problem, right? If you actually use the tools that are available, right? And we've done a lot of work in multisig. Multisig's advanced a lot, and there's very good software. Like Casa is a great wallet, for example. There's other implementations. Nunchuck, a lot more private, a lot more open source and hardcore. There's all kinds of different multisig wallets. So from a wrench attack perspective, just make it so that it's really hard for you to move your money. All of your money, right? And then you have concentric circles of security. You have your big pocket, your medium pocket, your small pocket, and then you pay in Bitcoin with Lightning, or even if they dox like one address, you can have a coin journey in the middle. Again, like there's 50 ways to do this. It's not that hard. Like it's hard, but there's tools. We have tools in Bitcoin. So it's just like the learning curve is a lot higher than Monero, and I wish it wasn't, but it is. So
Thank you.
cheers, man. All right, thanks everybody.